The Green Hills of Earth by Robert A. Heinlein. 2. As time and space come bending back to shape this star-specked scene, their tranquil tears of tragic joy still spread their silver sheen. Along the Grand Canal still soar the fragile towers of truth. Their fairy grace defend this place of beauty calm and couth. Bone-tired the race that raised the towers, forgotten are their lores. Long gone the gods who shed the tears that lap these crystal shores. Slow heats the time-worn hearts of Mars beneath the icy sky. The thin air whispers voicelessly that all who live must die. Yet still the lacy spires of truth sing beauty's madrigal, and she herself will ever dwell along the Grand Canal. From the Grand Canal, by permission of Lux Transcriptions Limited, London and Luna City. On the swing back they set Rising down on Mars at Drywater. The boys passed the hat, and the skipper kicked in a half-month's pay. That was all. Finish. Just another space bum, who had not had the good fortune to finish it off when his luck ran out. He holed up with the prospectors and archaeologists at How Far for a month or so, and could probably have stayed forever in exchange for his songs and his accordion playing. But spacemen die if they stay in one place. He hooked a crawler over to Drywater again, and thence to Marisopolis. The capital was well into its boom. The processing plants lined the Grand Canal on both sides, and roiled the ancient waters with the filth of their runoff. This was before the Tri-Planet Treaty forbade disturbing cultural relics for commerce. Half the slender, fairy-like towers had been torn down, and the others were disfigured to adapt them as pressurized buildings for Earthmen. Now Riesling had never seen any of these changes, and no one described them to him. When he saw Marsopolis again, he visualized it as it had been, before it had been rationalized for trade. His memory was good. He stood on the Rapian Escalade where the ancient grate of Mars had taken their ease and saw its beauty spreading out before his blinded eyes. Ice-blue plain of water unmoved by tide, untouched by breeze, and reflecting serenely the sharp, bright stars of the Martian sky. And beyond the water, the lacy buttresses and flying towers of an architecture too delicate for our rumbling, heavy planet. The result was Grand Canal. The subtle change in his orientation, which enabled him to see beauty at Marsopolis, where beauty was not, now began to affect his whole life. All women became beautiful to him. He knew them by their voices, and fitted their appearance to the sounds. It is a mean spirit indeed, who will speak to a blind man other than in gentle friendliness. Scolds who had given their husbands no peace sweetened their voices to Riesling. It populated his world with beautiful women and gracious men. Dark Star Passing, Bernice's Hair, Death Song of a Woods Colt, and other love songs of the Wanderers and womanless men of space were a direct result of the fact that his conceptions were unsullied by tawdry truths. It mellowed his approach, changed his doggerel to verse, and sometimes even to poetry. He had had plenty of time to think now, time to get all the lovely words just so, and to worry a verse until it sang true in his head, the monotonous beat of jet song. When the field is clear, the report's all seen. When the lock's eyes shut, when the lights wink green, when the checkoff's done, when it's time to pray, when the captain nods, when she blasts away. Hear the jets, hear them snarl at your back. When you're stretched on the rack, feel your ribs clamping your chest, feel your neck grind its rest, feel the pain in your ship, feel her strain in their grip, feel her rise, feel her drive, straining steel come alive, on her jets. Came to him not while he himself was a jetman, but later, while he was hitchhiking from Mars to Venus and sitting out a watch with an old shipmate. At Venusberg, he sang his new songs and some of the old in the bars. Some would start a hat around for him. It would come back with a minstrel's usual take, doubled or tripled in recognition of the gallant spirit behind the bandaged eyes. It was an easy life. Any spaceport was his home, and any ship his private carriage. No skipper cared to refuse to lift the extra mass of blind Riesling and his squeeze box. He shuttled from Venusberg to Layport to Drywater to New Shanghai, or back again, as the whim took him. He never went closer to Earth than Supra-New York Space Station. Even when signing the contract for Songs of the Spaceways, he made his mark in a cabin, classer liner somewhere between Luna City and Ganymede. Horowitz, the original publisher, was aboard for a second honeymoon, and heard Riesling sing at the ship's party. Horowitz knew a good thing for the publishing trade when he heard it. The entire contents of Songs were sung directly into a tape in the communications room of that ship before he let Riesling out of his sight. The next 3 volumes were squeezed out of Riesling at Venusberg, where Horowitz had sent an agent to keep him liquored up until he had sung all he could remember. Upship is certainly not authentic Riesling throughout. Much of it is Riesling's, no doubt, and the jet song is unquestionably his, but most of the verses were collected after his death from people who had known him during those wanderings. The Green Hills of Earth grew through 20 years. The earliest form we know about was composed before Riesling was blinded, during a drinking bout with some of the indentured men on Venus. The verses were concerned mostly with the things the labor clients intended to do back on Earth, if and when they ever managed to pay their bounties, and thereby be allowed to go home. Some of the stanzas were vulgar, some were not, but the chorus were recognizably that of Green Hills. We know exactly where the final form of Green Hills came from, and when. There was a ship in at the Venus Ellis Isle, which was scheduled for the direct jump from there to Great Lakes, Illinois. She was the Old Falcon, youngest of the Hawk class, and the first ship to apply the Harriman Trust's new policy of extra fare express service between Earth cities and any colony with scheduled stops. Riesling decided to ride her back to Earth. Perhaps his own song had gotten under his skin, or perhaps he just hankered to see his native Ozarks one more time. The company no longer permitted deadheads. Riesling knew this, but it never occurred to him that the ruling might apply to him. He was getting old for a spaceman, and just a little matter of fact about his privileges. Not senile. He simply knew that he was one of the landmarks in space, along with Halley's Comet, the Rings, and Brewster's Ridge. He walked in the cruise port, went below, and made himself at home in the first empty acceleration coach. The captain found him there while making a last-minute tour of his ship.
What are you doing here?
Dragging it back to Earth, Captain. Riesling needed no eyes to see the skipper's 4 stripes.
You can't drag in this ship. You know the rules. Shake a leg and get out of here. We raise ship at once.
The captain was young, and he had come up after Riesling's active time. But Riesling knew the type. 5 years at Harriman Hall with only cadet practice trips instead of solid deep space experience. The two men did not touch in background nor spirit. Space was changing. Now, Captain, you wouldn't begrudge an old man the trip home. The officer hesitated. Several of the crew had stopped to listen.
I can't do it. Space Precautionary Act, Clause 6. No one shall enter space save as a licensed member of a crew of a chartered vehicle or as a paying passenger of such vessel under such regulations as you may be issued pursuant to this act. Up you get, and out you go.
Riesling lolled back, his hands under his head. If I got to go, I'm damned if I'll walk. Carry me. The captain bit his lip and said,
Master-at-Arms, have this man removed.
The ship's policeman fixed his eyes on the overhead struts.
Well, I can't rightly do it, Captain. I've sprained me shoulder.
The other crew members, present at the moment before, had faded into the bulkhead paint.
Well, get a working party.
Aye, aye, sir.
He, too, went away. Riesling spoke again. Now look, Skipper, let's not have any hard feelings about this. You've got an out to carry me if you want. The Distressed Spaceman Clause.
Distressed spaceman, my eye. You're no distressed spaceman, you're a space lawyer. I know who you are. You've been bumming around the system for years. Well, you don't do it in my ship. That clause was intended to succor men who have missed their ships, not to let a man drag free all over space.
Well now, Captain, can you properly say I haven't missed my ship? I've never been back home since my last trip as a signed-on crew member. The law says I have a trip back.
But that was years ago. You've used up your chance.
Have I now? Clause doesn't say a word about how soon a man has to take his trip back. It just says he's got it coming to him. Go look it up. Skipper, if I'm wrong, I'll not only walk out on my 2 legs, I'll beg your humble pardon in front of the crew. Go on. Look it up. Be a sport. Riesling could feel the man's glare, but he turned and stomped out of the compartment. Riesling knew that he had used his blindness to place the captain in an impossible position, but this did not embarrass Riesling. He rather enjoyed it. 10 minutes later the siren sounded. He heard the orders on the bullhorn for up stations. When the soft sighing of the locks and the slight pressure change in his ears let him know that takeoff was imminent, he got up and shuffled down to the power room. As he wanted to be near the jets when they blasted off, he needed no one to guide him in any ship of the Hawk class. Trouble started during the first watch. Riesling had been lounging in the inspector's chair, fiddling with keys of his accordion, and trying out a new version of Green Hills. Let me breathe unrationed air again, where there's no lack nor dearth, and something 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 earth. It would not come out right. He tried again. Let the sweet fresh breezes heal me, as they rove around the girth of our lovely mother planet, of the cool green hills of Earth. That was better, he thought. How do you like that, Archie?
Pretty good. Give up with the whole thing.
Archie McDougal, chief jetman, was an old friend, both stateside and in bars. He'd been an apprentice under Rising many years and millions of miles back. You youngsters have it soft. Everything automatic. When I was twisted in her tail, you had to stay awake.
Still have to stay awake.
They fell to talking shop, and McDougal showed him the direct response damping rig, which had replaced the manual Vernier control which Reisling had used. Reisling felt out the controls and asked questions until he was familiar with the new installation. It was his conceit that he was still a jetman, and that his present occupation as a troubadour was simply an expedient during one of his fusses with a company that any man could get into. I see you still have the old handmade damping plates installed. His agile fingers flitting over the equipment.
I'll accept the links. I didn't ship them because they obscure the dials.
You ought to have them shipped. You might need them.
Oh, I don't know. I think...
Reisling never did find out what McDougal thought, for it was at that moment the trouble tore loose. McDougal caught it square, a blast of radioactivity that burned him down where he stood. Reisling sensed what had happened. Automatic reflexes of old habit came out. He slapped the Discover and rang the alarm to the control room simultaneously. Then he remembered the unshipped links. He had to grope until he found them, while trying to keep as low as he could to get maximum benefit from the baffles. Nothing but the links bothered him as to location. The place was as light to him as any place could be. He knew every spot, every control, the way he knew the keys of his accordion.
Power room! Power room! What's the alarm?
Stay out. The place is hot. He could feel it on his face and in his bones, like desert sunshine. The links he got into place after cursing someone, anyone, for having failed to rack the wrench he needed. Then he commenced trying to reduce the trouble by hand. It was a long job and ticklish. Presently he decided that the jet would have to be spilled, pile and all. First he reported. Control.
Control, aye.
Spilling jet 3, emergency.
Is this McDougal?
McDougal is dead. This is Reisling, on watch. Stand by to record. There was no answer. Dumbfounded the skipper may have been, but he could not interfere in the power room emergency. He had the ship to consider, and the passengers and crew. The doors had to stay closed. The captain must have been still more surprised at what Reisling sent for record. It was, we rot in the molds of Venus, we retch at their tainted breath. Foul are her flooded jungles, crawling with unclean death. Reisling went on cataloguing the solar system as he worked. Harsh bright soil of Luna, Saturn's rainbow rings, the frozen night of Titan. All the while opening and spilling the jets and fishing it clean. He finished with an alternate chorus. We've tried each spinning space mote, and reckoned its true worth. Take us back again to the homes of men, on the cool green hills of Earth. Then, almost absent-mindedly, he remembered to tack on the revised first verse. The arching sky is calling spacemen back to their trade. All hands stand by free-falling, and the lights below us fade. Outride the sons of Terra, far drives the thundering jets. Up leaps the race of Earthmen, out far and onward yet. The ship was safe now, and ready to limp home, shy one jet. As for himself, Reisling was not so sure. That sunburn seemed sharp, he thought. He was unable to see the bright rosy fog in which he worked, but he knew it was there. He went on with the business of flushing the air out through the outer valve, repeating it several times to permit the level of radiation to drop somewhere a man might stand under suitable armor. While he did this, he sent one more chorus, the last bit of authentic Reisling that ever could be. We pray for one last landing on the globe that gave us birth. Let us rest our eyes on fleecy skies and the cool green hills of Earth.
Welcome to the Dead Zone podcast. Dead Zone is the sci-fi tabletop miniature skirmish game from Mantic Games. And now, here are your hosts.
Hey Jack,
Hey, Rob.
have you heard of Dead Zone, the podcast before?
Yes, I have. And where would you find that?
That would be at deadzonegame.podbean.com.